Hey E3 members, welcome back. We got a very special session here at E3 TV with none other than Trent Palmer, the internet sensation. And I know this is a big ask that everybody has out there to do a back scenes private interview with Trent, and you guys get to hear a little bit more about him, especially now because he is an executive and part owner of the company. So I know that a lot of people are excited to hear from him, and I'm excited to hear from you. I know I got some really cool questions that I'm going to spring on you and hopefully try to trip you up and get some fun conversations going here. But
yeah, bring it.
But thanks for coming on. I know that everybody's excited to hear from you.
Yeah,
and
happy
it
to
should
be
be good.
Here.
Yeah. So let's dig right in and talk first about let's just talk about a little bit about who is Trent, like all the way up to before you started flying and doing all the really cool stuff you're doing now. Like, what was your growing up like?
So I was born and raised in Truckee, California. It's a little ski town north of Lake Tahoe. My dad actually opened the first downhill ski shop in Truckee. So he had me on skis by the age of 2, like right after I could walk, I want to say. So I grew up as a ski bum. Picked up my first camera when I was in high school because a lot of my friends were going to be pro skiers. They were the ones winning Junior Olympics. And so that's what kind of got me to grab a camera and start making films. And so I started with ski movies, ended up working my way into a full-time editing job for a larger production company. Was all into RC, started flying RC helicopters, those turned to drones. FAA made me get my pilot's license, and then I started flying planes.
So the FAA, what, did you get your 107 first? Is that what
This
you did?
was way before the 107. Yeah, this was the Section 333 exemption.
Okay.
So basically, it was part of the 2012 Remodernization Act that the FAA did, but they really didn't start enforcing it till 2014. And basically it said anyone that's flying an unmanned aircraft has to carry at least a private pilot certificate. Back then, and to some extent still, I was terrified of heights, terrified of flying, wanted nothing to do with it. Yeah. So the whole pilot certificate thing was a means to an end. It was like, I'm gonna get my check ride and I'll put the certificate in a drawer and never touch it again. And it was funny, come 20 hours, it started to click and I was like, I kind of like this. And come check ride, it was like, what do I have to do to continue flying? What can I afford to purchase and maintain and fuel? So that was what got me into aviation. And the Kitfox, the plane I had up until just recently, just fit the bill as far as price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I think you just answered it, but like one of my questions was going to be is like, what made you want to start flying?
Yeah.
And that was
I didn't want to.
You didn't want it at all?
Yeah, it's crazy too. I've always had a fascination with flight. Like as a kid, I'd make my parents buy the Discovery Flight Channel so I could watch all the airplane stuff. And I was like, if there was ever a paper airplane contest, I would win. Like I was really into that, really into RC planes, but just terrified of actually flying. So it wasn't until I started learning more about it and actually being in control of the aircraft and understanding like I can control this, my fate to some extent, that I gained some comfort.
That's cool. So I want to ask you, like when you were going through the process of getting your pilot's license and you're doing your ground school and learning, like what was some of the other thoughts that were kind of going through your head as you were progressing through it?
Again, I was such a unique scenario because I was doing it because I had to. So at that time, I was still working in the film industry, flying unmanned aircraft. I was just doing it under, that period, I guess I couldn't have legally done it in the States. I think I was only taking international work. But on some of our longer flights, like we did a job in Brazil, I remember doing a lot of my online ground school, just watched the entire course. I did sporties or something. So when I got into flying, I had an instructor. I'm like, this is what I learned. Let me demonstrate that so we can move on. Because I was like, I don't want to be in the plane any longer than I have to. So yeah, I treated it more like a job probably than most.
Yeah.
I wish I would have, in hindsight, spent more time enjoying it and absorbing. But it was a means to an end at that point.
You didn't have the Kitfox before you got your license, all right? You got your license. So how long was it between your license and getting your first plane?
Gosh, I think
your first plane was the Kitfox, right?
Yeah. I mean, my check ride was, I think, 2014, right in December, and I bought the plane in February. I was at 50 hours total when I got the Kitfox, 0 tail wheel. And I had never even been in a tail wheel, and I'd never even seen a Kitfox in person. I bought it sight unseen and just off YouTube videos of like their old VHS tapes that Kitfox had remastered from back in the day and decided, well, that looks like a fun plane. So, and man, I don't think I slept for a week before I picked up the plane. And once we got it, I was just like, oh, that was an intimidating moment.
Why? Were you just like excited or thinking about
All
it?
of it. It was a sensory overload. And I'm like, did I make a mistake? Is this the right aircraft? I know nothing about these things. And I brought a friend of mine who was my original flight instructor, and he had some tailwheel time, but not a ton, and zero Kitfox time.
Yeah.
And I think it'd been a while since he's flown a tailwheel. And that, with my standard, the spring gear that my plane came with the smaller tires, that thing was squirrely. And I have no idea how we didn't ground loop it on the way home. Like,
Really?
we were using up full widths of runways getting out. And he let me try to take off one, and I probably took out a runway light. So by the time I got home, I'm just like, I don't know if I made a mistake. Is this too much airplane for me? So, but then, once you get your feet to go the right direction and get up to speed with your brain, then a tail wheel's not that big a deal.
And then you greased this one today. Smoothest landing I've seen in it.
No.
But and by the way, everybody, we're talking about stuff like Trent was thinking back when he was getting his pilot's license. We have a whole course you can go check out about like the top 10 things that most pilots wish they knew before getting their pilot's license. So it's a really good series. You're going to go check that out. Trent's in that one as well. When you got your car, when you got that plane, so you started flying right away then when you got it home, right?
Oh, yeah.
What was your first trip?
Well, so most of my stuff's local. That's the other thing. I have such a good playground, and for the backcountry type flying, like I do a lot of little local flights. So I think the majority of the first hours I got in it was pretty nearby. I guess the first trip was over the hill. It's like a 45-minute or hour flight to go get breakfast. I took Haley. I think it was Valentine's Day or something. We went down for breakfast in Quincy, California. And then the first longer trip, I think I flew it up to Oregon, like Bend, Oregon, for a job. And I remember feeling like I opened a flight plan and everything. That
was a big deal, right?
I don't think I've filed a flight plan since then.
I was terrified putting my flight plan in. Remember we had the little cards with how you put your flight plan in and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I don't know why I was so scared to ever get on the phone with those guys and put my flight plan in and do a briefing.
And of course I forgot to close it. So I got the call afterwards.
Hello.
Oh no. So yeah. And now with all our devices, like I probably should file flight plans when I've got 4 different devices that are tracking me, that people can see my location. And oftentimes I'm flying with other aircraft. So to me, I'm like, that's kind of our safety blanket. If something were to happen and I was to go down, I mean, they're right with me. That's probably the biggest reason.
I have my own little, I'm also a yacht captain.
Yeah.
So we do what's called a float plan.
Gotcha.
So if we're going to go out in the boat, like if I'm going to go out fishing, like sword fishing or something off the coast of Florida here, I usually fill out this float plan and I keep it with people. Where I'm going to be, where my area, when I anticipated being back, all that kind of stuff. And I would keep that with people. And I do the same thing with my wife here too. So if I'm going somewhere, I'll write that down or leave it with a buddy or something like that.
Yeah.
Did you go like bush landing right away when you got your plane? I mean, what were you landing on the first week or two?
No, it was all pavement, but I want to say maybe we went to a dirt strip nearby, and there's some other like kind of rundown airstrips. They're still pavement that were smaller, and those were like a lot of fun because it was only 30 feet wide instead of 150 feet like my main airport. But pretty quickly, I want to say within the first couple weeks I had it, I was going out to dry lake beds and landing on those and the shorelines of reservoirs nearby. Yeah. My first real off airport landing, I think I was probably at like 90 hours. One that was, you had to hit your mark, and it was limited in length and harder to read the terrain and all that.
But when you first got the Kitfox, were you kind of wanting to or knowing you wanted to go do like bush type flying, or that was a plane you thought would work and then you go hooked on bush flying? Yeah. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, it was like, it looked like a fun plane. I heard tail wheels were fun and I should get that. And you could do a little bit of like backcountry or off airport work. I didn't plan on doing what I did, and that plane kind of grew as my mission evolved, because originally it wasn't it was an 80 horse engine with a small wing and small tires and all that, and obviously over the nearly 10 years I had it, I basically changed everything out. Yeah. So the machine that I sold just recently was not anything near the machine I bought.
Really?
So, yeah.
Well, I tell you, partly what we want to do, guys, is we want to inspire more people to get out and explore like that, be able to go do these type of things, whether it's get your tail wheel, whether it's a float plane like this. I mean, if you all have been following us, and a lot of members, you've seen our extras and our FX3 Carbon Cub, and of course the Conquest, all our planes that we had that you all remember seeing. But we just did what Trent just talked about with this one. It was like, I've had my float plane for a while. Went to Jack Brown's in Florida, which is iconic.
Yeah.
And we would just go there every couple of years and do reoccurring, just because it's so much fun to fly float planes. We finally broke down this year And you can go see the full video on the X Cub we have here on floats. But after the first couple of times landing this, as owning the airplane, it was like, I'm hooked. This is so much fun. It's a blast. So we go out to islands and the Keys and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
but
yeah,
we encourage everybody, if there's ways you can try to even connect with friends or get in the community. You know, I got hooked because I got in the community with other people that had these kind of planes, and I just asked, hey, I want to do more of this. How can I go on a ride or two, or can you tell me your experience? And you know, that's what our community is about. So all you guys know that you have us to reach out to, and everybody else in the community that we can share these things with and stuff. So that's a great piece. So now that you're in thousands of hours of flying and stuff, what is your favorite location, and has it evolved for you? Or
so I guess there's a couple different ways to look at that. You know, there's places that it might not be a challenging landing, but it's just awesome being there. Yeah. So like there's a couple strips in the Idaho backcountry that are just unreal. From a technical standpoint, not that hard to land at. They're all very long strips. You kind of have to understand mountain flying and backcountry flying to get into them, but the strips are long. You could land any airplane at them. Mm-hmm. So there's a few of those that are really fun. And then around my house, I got a couple that are up on high mountaintops, and there's something about just landing on top of a mountain and looking around, and you know, you're 3,000 feet above all the terrain around you. That's pretty fun. I got one from my house that's like a 4-minute flight from my house, and it's 3,000 feet higher, and I can land on top of a mountain, and then when I take off, it's just a sled ride down the canyon back down. So that one's always fun, and that one's challenging. The wind has to be right, and all the conditions have to kind of line up because it's short and steep and rough and all the bad things at 8,000 feet. So
when you hit some of those spots, is it more of the art of landing, getting there, cool, taking off, going to the next one, or do you land and just really enjoy the environment, or depends on the mood that day?
So it's funny, that's something that shifted a lot in the last few years. So originally I was flying the plane like a dirt bike. The sole point was just to fly the plane, and these landings were like hitting a new jump. Like it was the coolest thing. And we'd just go out and land in all these places. When I say I fly with a lot of people often. It's pretty rare that I'm just out as a single plane. Normally we have groups of us. Mm-hmm. But originally it was all about just flying and landing somewhere new to say you landed there. A few years ago, I was going up to Idaho, and a friend said, hey, you should pick up a fly fishing rod because we're going to go fly fishing. So obviously sucked at fly fishing for a long time, still do probably. Now I enjoy having a purpose. It's like, okay, now I know there's a spot I want to fish here. How can I use the skills I've built over the past 9-10 years to find somewhere that I can land close by and then go fishing from there? So that's probably my favorite at this point, because it brings everything together. Like, Nevada's 85% public land, 65% is just open, unrestricted BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and all of that's fair game. So you can land pretty much anywhere. So if you want to go out and just land at 20 places in a row, you can out where I live. But once you start saying, well, I need to be close to this point, and then a lot of times where we're fly fishing, some of it's in the desert, some of it's in the trees. So you got to find a nearby meadow and understand how to kind of shop the field and build an approach and understand, obviously, land ownership, but the terrain and where your outs, are there outs? Like all that kind of stuff. So it kind of brings all those skills together, and it makes it way more gratifying to me.
You get to enjoy the nature and the outdoor and all that a little bit more. It takes it to another level. It's funny you say that, because if you guys haven't checked out, make sure you check out the E3 SkyShare app, because a lot of stuff Trent just talked about is inside, and you have access to it as a member. It's inside there where you can find these locations you want to go explore, and our community has already done a lot of the work for you. So like there's a whole bunch of Trent locations. So you go in there's even some of his videos that he did going into Johnson Creek. And there's pictures there. There's also videos from the state that actually do videos and brief you on how to make those landings and stuff. Where is it safe to land? What's there to look out for? But check out the E3 SkyShare app, and whole new world of places you can explore. And it's everything from Trent's favorite secret places that he's never shared with anybody to, backcountry strips, and even a whole bunch of, even if you're flying seaplanes, there's restaurant locations and stuff all over the place you can go to in seaplanes as well.
Yeah, and one of the things I love is that you can sort based on activities to do there. So whether if you want to go camping, fishing, hunting,
hiking,
any of that stuff. So because it's user generated, we all can go and add our favorite landing spots in there and you mention what you can do there.
Yeah.
And it's like, this would have been the best thing in the world when I was first finding all these spots. If I could just go and say, wow, okay, someone already did the research for me, knows it's safe, knows it's legal, and knows what there is to do around there. So I'm excited about SkyShare.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, because the team's been building it for us. You know,
Yeah.
we've been giving them feedback and things, but I've been getting more excited going in every day to look at the ones that they added today, or the community. You know, there's some pilots and stuff, there's members that are putting stuff in there, and I'm going, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know this place. Like, I didn't know about Gaston, and I think it's in North Carolina or Tennessee. It's like this incredible grass strip with camping and restaurant. But you can go into the app and you can click sea restaurant, land restaurant, backcountry only, or bush landing only, or just land only, or museums. Like, you can sit there and click buttons and sift and sort, and the map cleans up based on what you want. So I may wake up today and say, I want to go hit some seaplane with my wife, and let's go to a restaurant somewhere. I go click a couple buttons, and it cleans the map up and shows me all the stuff around me that's seaplane with restaurants.
Yeah.
Same thing with, you know, even backcountry strips with restaurants, or a short walk to a restaurant or something.
Yeah.
It's been so much fun just looking at all the stuff that everybody's been putting in.
Yeah.
But you didn't tell us your favorite location so far.
Man, so we have a place that we land above Lake Tahoe that's at 9,000 feet, and it's just the prettiest view. Again, super condition dependent.
Yeah.
But that one, it's one of those that the first time you land there, you're shaking. But once you understand where to touch down, where your rollout is and all that, it's pretty straightforward, but it's just the prettiest views you've ever seen.
Yeah.
That one, and then I have one spot on the East Walker River, which is south of where I live, that's really good fishing, and it's an awesome, I did a video with my dog where I landed and parked right on the river, like my props basically hanging over the bank of the river, and we set the tent under the wing and went fishing for the day, and then had our little fire and camped out, and it was just perfect. So
see, those are the memories that we want people to experience more.
Yeah.
You know, where's some of the places you want to go? Like, what are some of the things you want to now do?
Oh, so Alaska.
Yeah.
That's been bucket list for me for a long time, and I find that I keep doing this. Oh, maybe next year, and then you kind of have to rewrite your brain and say, well, do I want to be 1 year older when I first do this? Like, I want this to be something I do. Like, every summer, I'd love to go to Alaska. So, as you know, I'm building a new plane, a Cub. And one of the things was, like, I'm building this and I'm flying it to Alaska.
I was just going to ask you that. I was like,
yeah.
Were you building that with in mind?
Yes.
This is what I want to do?
Well, I was going to go to Alaska next spring before I had decided to build the new plane. Mm-hmm. So I was going to take the Kitfox, and I was already looking through logistics. The hardest part about that flight up to Alaska is any way you take it, there's a pretty desolate run. If you fly the coast, it's about 6 hours of no outs and no services. And you basically need to look for a really good high pressure system and try to hit it at low tide. So if you have an engine out, at least you have maybe a beach to land on. But 6 hours of endurance is a long time. And if you have a headwind, that might be a problem. So the next one in is the Trench. It's up the Rocky Mountain Trench. Through there, I think it's a 400 and something mile leg of no services, but there are dirt strips. So you bring bags of fuel if you need it. Again, look for a high pressure system. If you got a big headwind, you better know at some point to turn around before you're at the halfway point. So yeah, I did a bunch of flight planning with the Kitfox in mind. Now my new plane, I'm putting much larger fuel tanks, so it's less of a concern.
If you all don't know, he's built a Legend Cub, which is incredible. You got to go check it out. Go look at some of the videos, go to his channel, check that out. We kind of did the same thing. Like, we buy the plane to try to fulfill what our passion is and what we want to do and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear. So what's like your 5-year plan? Like, what is it, the next big things you want to do just in general?
Think that far ahead. I'm all excited about next summer. But
Okay.
Floats at some point, those are on my radar. Obviously,
How about tomorrow?
Yeah, well,
Want
we
to
can go
tomorrow?
fly some. I want to own floats. I want a gantry in my hangar that I can lift the thing and change my floats on and off. The hard thing is where I live is, I'm in the desert. It's not a float friendly. I mean, it's float friendly, but there's not many options. So it's hard to justify, but at some point floats would be fun. I'd like to do some ski flying. I haven't done that yet. But again, where I live, we get snow, and we have enough snow to ski off of at my strip for like a couple days.
Yeah.
But so if I had straight skis, it would be a little tough. I'd probably need either retracts or penetration skis or something. But those are both on my radar. And then I keep having in the back of my mind that it'd be fun to build a faster plane, like a 4-seat, cross-country type plane.
Like a Cirrus type thing, or you want to build one, so like a Rans or something, or
Probably
Vans or
RV,
something.
RV or Sling or something, something that's 4-place.
Yeah, those would be fun.
Yeah.
For sure. What about just general and like business and life, and other than just flying stuff? Like, I mean, just going to keep doing what you're doing with your channel, or what else
Yeah,
you want to
and
do?
I'm always
Inspire
like-
people, or
Yeah, mostly, I plan on continuing the YouTube thing. I don't like when I see other creators get into it for a little bit and then they either feel like they hit a cap or they were snowballing to a point and then they get disappointed and burn out or something. Like, I just hate when that happens. And to me, I'm not doing it for growth or any of that. I'm doing it because I'm passionate about aviation and I love going out and flying, and I love making videos. So it's easy for me to just continue doing. And every once in a while you'll get someone that comes up to you and says, hey, you're the reason that I got into flying. Yeah. And right there, I'm like, you know, that reignites the fire for at least another year.
Yep.
So if I can continue to do that, I'll be pretty happy. But yeah, business-wise, I'm not a super smart business guy, so I don't plan that far ahead. But I'm pretty good at you know, fitting the mold if I see that there's a position for me somewhere.
Okay.
So.
All right. So next thing I want to ask you, and this is really to help others learn from us, but what do you think during your whole aviation career is some of the biggest mistakes you made?
Probably the biggest, when I first started my training, I rented a plane from a flight school that did the bulk buy. They gave me a deal if I paid for all my hours up front, and I did it. And then the plane ended up breaking down and was unavailable, and I couldn't finish my certificate in it, and I never got that money back. So that was one of the big things that, like, for student pilots, I'm like, avoid doing that. Don't do the bulk buy, just pay as you go, because I have spoken to a lot of other pilots that have similar stories. So yeah, that was the first big one. I also hot rodded an engine that was originally 80 horse that I didn't know the history of, with a whole bunch of grab bag parts from other engines. And it made a lot of power right until it didn't. And so, yeah, that was...
Small detail that's important for pilots, just so you know. We have to have power.
Yeah, yeah. I've only now, you know, one glider landing unplanned in my book. I'm going to try to keep it that way.
That wasn't in the Kitfox, or was
that
it?
wasn't the Kitfox, yeah.
So that was before the engine you have now.
Yeah, that's kind of what led to the 915. So I had a 912 with a big bore and a big cam in it, and it was all hot rodded. It made good power, and it always seemed like it ran good. Yeah, I was just cruising along. I was dead nuts halfway between Boise, Idaho, and Reno, Nevada, which is about as desolate as you can get in the lower 48 as far as no services. And I heard a little buzzing sound, and I thought it was maybe my music in my headset. So I pulled the throttle back, and in hindsight, I guess if your engine's acting up, don't touch the throttle. And the second I did that, it was like clank and shook the whole plane. Like, it stopped so violently, I was like, I'm not even going to try to restart that.
Yeah.
So, and I was probably at 500, 300 AGL. I was crossing a little mountain range, so I kind of just matched, you know, the map of the earth kind of terrain down, and ended up landing downhill with a pretty heavy tailwind. And when the dust settled, it was uneventful, but scared the heck out of me, more than I thought it would.
I mean, I hate that people have those experiences, but if you go through them and you're okay, they're really good to have as a pilot. I mean,
yeah.
It's like going to do upset recovery training and stuff. It's like, it's not necessarily fun, but it's really good. After you've done it, you have a different appreciation and a different, you know, respect for what we do.
What was weird though, so prior to that, when you say practice engine outs, I would shut my engine off and go land. I've shut my engine off, throw the keys in the back, so I had to land. So I'd practiced, and I've landed uphill, downhill, side hill.
You tell me that's not one of your mistakes?
No, those were fine. I mean, there's probably an argument that was part of why I was so successful in that. You know, that was not my first time landing with my engine fully off. And anyone that thinks that engine at idle makes zero thrust is wrong. We've tested it. You do not glide as far. So so let's say you can hit your numbers every single time at idle, you will short the runway with your prop stopped. Yeah. And even worse if it's windmilling. So you're almost, if your engine quits, you're better like slowing it down, get the prop to fully stop, and then glide. But what was crazy to me is that I was as qualified as I could be. I only flew one plane. I knew the thing, like, you know, I wore that plane. I put it on. I didn't get in it.
And how does that glide engine out? Is it all right?
Yeah. Well, like, they always like joke that if you want to know where you're going to land when you're in, just throw your keys out. That's where you're going to land. That's so right. I pretty much just aimed straight at the ground. But what was crazy was when it happened, I was like, whoa, you know, it takes you a second to recognize this is real. And then the immediate thoughts that went through my head was like, this is what it feels like before you wreck your plane. And I'm like, is this what it feels like before you die? And then I kind of got woozy, like lightheaded, like thought I might faint. And I remember being like, dude, get your crap together, because you faint, you're dead. And like, even remember like flexing my legs and my stomach to push blood to my brain, and just kind of shook it off. And I was like, you know, fly now, be scared later. To someone that wasn't as qualified or comfortable in their aircraft or hadn't practiced that, and maybe someone that doesn't handle stress. And I'm normally pretty good in high stress situations. So it was interesting that I had that response. But it does make me wonder when I hear of people having engine failures and then they, you know, turn into a crater in the ground. I'm like, they might have just fainted because they couldn't handle the stress.
Yeah,
So
there's no doubt. I mean, I've flown, I don't know how many planes now, well over 50, and owned 15, 16 planes at this point. So I've had enough of things that happened that I look back and I think about, I was proud of how I handled the situation. And when I look back at all of them, from gear up landings to engine fires, and it's because I was always calm and situational awareness and didn't rush to do anything. Because I'll fly with some young pilots and stuff, and something will happen and I freak out and want to do something right away. I'm like, stop, slow down.
yeah,
The plane's flying, you're okay. There's not a fire in the cockpit or something. Slow down a little bit. But that was usually always the thing that I look back and say, the reason those situations were handled successfully is because I was calm and I was already always thinking and being aware of what's going to happen. What am I going to do if this happens? Or what's going to happen if I had an engine out here? Or, well, if I had an engine fire here at 37,000 feet, what would I do? So I'm always thinking of those things. But I'm only saying this because it's one of those things, like you said, handling stress, be ready to be calm and verify the situation, because the engine fire situations I have, there wasn't an engine fire. It was a King Airs, and King Airs typically, when they're flying through rain, something happens where the rain gets in and gets through the sensor or something, and then all of a sudden you get an engine fire. And we'll go to flight safety with some people, and the engine fire, boom, they go hit the button. I'm like, wait a minute, you didn't even have an engine fire.
and what's
But
the button do?
now you just blew the bottles and
Oh,
blew all that stuff, and when you do that, the engine's toast.
oh yeah.
But so it's really like calm, verify,
Mhm.
make sure, fly the plane, everything they teach us. But
Yeah.
so it's interesting you say that. And by the way, we have a whole bunch of series that you guys can go check out on all the stuff that we're talking about when we get specific in it. And especially one that's slated that's coming up. This Trent's doing a whole course on filming for YouTube and things like that, right?
Yeah, how to make flying content. I get too many comments on it, and it's something that it's probably time that we sit down and talk about and go through at least my theory on it.
Yeah. So without going through all the stuff we're going to be filming for people, is there like one or two takeaways that you've kind of learned from the YouTube part of it so far?
No, I mean, you're trying to bring them along on an adventure. And whatever you think is the most interesting part of your flight is probably what other people think is, but also you don't need to put all the middle stuff in. I think it's pretty easy to get into an edit and you're kind of married to whatever you shot and you just want to let it live. Taking a kind of step back and looking at it and saying, do I need that to tell this whole story? Because this adventure is overall a story. And a lot of times I think some people get too married to certain shots or things that don't help tell that story.
Yeah.
And then that comes down to even camera placement, like where I place my cameras in the plane all have a certain purpose that, each one should have its purpose, right?
Yeah.
I've got one that shows me if I'm talking, so you have the person, the relatability of the character, and then there'll be an over the shoulder that kind of shows my perspective flying forward. And then I've got an outside angle or two that show the aircraft, but also the environment. So all of those kind of pieces go together to, I think, telling the right flying story. And then I think it's important too to include the reason, like, what are you flying to, right? So if you're going on, like, you're gonna go drop into a lake to have lunch somewhere, like, show that. It's fun. You don't have to, show your entire meal, but
Yeah.
like,
I think that's an important point, because we, in business, in copywriting and writing books, all that kind of stuff, the point is you write or you talk until you're done getting your point across that you're trying to achieve, and that's it. Now, if it takes you 15 minutes to do that, then you're done. But if it takes you 30 minutes to achieve that goal, then that's what it takes. But
yeah,
that's all you have to think about. Just be crystal clear on what your mission is for that particular piece.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Cool. I
that's
can't wait to film that with
I
you.
was gonna say, because there's a lot of theory into that. It's all simple stuff, but I could ramble for days. So,
Well, when we film the course,
Yeah.
we'll go through all that. I was going to ask you, like, what was some of your biggest scares in aviation, but it sounds like one you just talked about. Was there any like big scares?
there was one other. So yeah, the engine out scared me pretty good. The other was somehow every time I fly to Oshkosh, we deal with weather, but it's always the last leg into Reno that it's, we're at this point August or late July, hottest part of the year. All this convective stuff, we got dust devils and all sorts of weird things happening out in the desert, and it's always hot. But we had a microburst right after we took off from Battle Mountain, Nevada. It was my friend Kevin and I. I got into a downdraft that I was like, started at VY and then I'm at VX just full throttle trying to get my plane to not go down. And I was getting pushed down at like maybe 1,000 feet a minute, and it pushed me down to about 50 feet above the sagebrush, and it turned into a tailwind because I was indicating 50, doing 100 over the ground, and I thought I was about to land my plane in sagebrush at 100.
Wow.
And that one shook me, and he was the same on the radio. We were both like, what is going on? And, you know, getting the crap beat out of us, and it came out of nowhere. There was no indication, there was no forecast of this. So that one rattled me pretty good.
That would scare me,
yeah,
for sure. What would you say are some of the things that really made you feel good? Like, were there any moments in time in aviation that, like, you kind of really had confidence, you were proud of yourself, or big successes that you had that you felt great about?
Well, this one's kind of going back to the engine out, but a few days after the engine out, like I was coming back from Idaho, I forget what I was doing up there, some work on the plane. The next weekend there was a fly-in that some friends had orchestrated up in Oregon. And there's this restaurant called the Cowboy Dinner Tree, and you have to reserve it months in advance. So we had all put in our names for, like, I wanted the steak dinner. It was like a big deal. I forget, it was like a $50 or $100 meal. But they ran out, and there was a bunch of other pilots going. And so as soon as everyone heard my engine quit, I'm in a group text with all those guys, and everyone's like, I called Trent's place at that, you know, at the Cowboy Dinner Tree. But when my engine quit, called the owner of Kitfox. He brought a trailer out. We folded the wings, towed it back to Kitfox. I took the engine off the next day. I had another engine on it that day and flew it home the following day. So I went home, packed my bags, I kissed the wife, and turned around and flew up to the fly-in, and, like, the amount of high fives I got for showing up, you know, 2 days after an engine out at the next fly-in. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Cool. So I want to have a couple more questions that help people know who you are a little bit more. Like, what would you say your favorite movie is?
Man on Fire.
Yeah? Why?
Yeah. It was a Tony Scott film. It was all shot on 35, and they did this really cool thing with this hand crank camera where they did this, like, over and under speed, and it left this, like, film burn, like, overexposure, underexposure. It was, like, shot really cool from a technical standpoint, but it's a really good story too. And it's probably my favorite. Cool.
What would be something that most people don't know about you that would surprise them?
Kind of the backbone and how I got started in my entire trajectory for life as an adult. When I was in college, I was dating this girl that wanted to get a fake ID. And it's not like she was going out clubbing. She just wanted to be able to have a glass of wine at dinner. And so we found a guy that said he could do it, and he ended up not doing it. But I looked at his setup, and it was all just simple stuff. And at this point, my dad had sold the ski shop, and we had a sign shop. So I had access to all this stuff. And my entire history was graphic design and making stuff. So it kind of just turned into, well, the guy never got back to us. I'll just make one. So I made it, and then her friend wanted one, so I made her one.
Yeah, mission creep.
So all of a sudden, before I knew it, I'm like, oh man, I'm the guy that's making fake IDs. Like, I'm looking out for police. I've never done anything illegal.
Wasn't it fun when we were kids? Like that, you know?
So that's how I bought my first RC helicopter that I was able to mount a camera on. So that's what started my drone company. And actually, one of the guys that I sold the fake ID to was an intern at a film company in Reno. And he saw that I had an edit set up, and he was like, oh, do you want a job at a bigger production company? And so he got me the interview that led to my first job in the film industry, and also the fake IDs paid for the first helicopter. So it kind of set the pathway to me. And if you look at the helicopters leading to the planes, like, all of it kind of based around that.
That's a cool story.
It was a short little run, and I've never done anything illegal like that. It's totally out of character for me, but I don't regret it.
Cool. Do you want to close up? Anything you want to say to everybody? Or?
It was fun. I was excited to be on here. Looking forward to the next one. I'm sure this won't be the only one.
Yeah, make sure you guys watch your calendars and your emails. All kinds of stuff coming up. We got more private calls coming with Trent, more live webinars. We're actually, for you guys that don't know, because there might be a lot of new members here right now. There's new members every month, but as you can see, we're at the airport here, and we have a whole studio and things here, and we do a lot of live streams where Trent will be in Reno, we'll be here, and we'll be doing some talks back and forth, different topics, things like that. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for all that. Got some big fly-ins and stuff coming up, some more member events, just a lot of great stuff going on. So we got a lot of stuff coming up with Trent. So thanks, Trent. This was awesome. I know everybody, I'm sure, has learned some great stuff from you, and appreciate everything you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, take care, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.